The year was 1940. Britain was burning. German bombers filled the night sky. Cities turned into ruins, and the Royal Air Force was fighting to stay alive. The British needed something fast, faster than anything the Nazis had ever seen. But when Geoffrey de Havilland, a soft-spoken engineer with a stubborn streak, walked into the Air Ministry with his proposal, people laughed. A bomber made of wood, that sounded like madness. At a time when steel and aluminum ruled the skies, de Havilland wanted to build a lightweight aircraft, one without guns, without armor, and made mostly from birch and balsa wood. His logic was almost absurdly simple. They can T-hit what they can T-catch. The idea was to create a plane that was so fast, so agile that it wouldn't need heavy defenses. It would slip past radar, outrun fighters, and drop its bombs before the enemy even knew what hit them. But the British Air Ministry had doubts. They called it impractical, fragile, even suicidal. A wooden plane won't survive the front lines, they said. De Havilland didn't care. He went back to his factory, rallied his small team of engineers, and decided to build it anyway in secret. What no one realized was that his so-called toy plane would soon become the most feared multi-role aircraft of World War II, capable of bombing, spying, and even fighting back, all while made of nothing but wood. The first prototype of the de Havilland Mosquito took flight in November 1940. It looked nothing like the bulky bombers of the time. Sleek, narrow, almost elegant, like a Predator built for speed. Under its wooden shell were two Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same powerhouses that drove the legendary Spitfire. But because it was so light, the Mosquito could reach speeds over 400 miles per hour, faster than nearly any fighter in the sky. When the British Air Ministry finally saw it in action, they were speechless. It could fly higher, faster, and farther than expected, and the Germans couldn't believe it either. At first, German radar couldn't even detect it. Wood doesn't reflect radio waves the same way metal does. So when the Mosquito flew across enemy territory, Luftwaffe operators often saw nothing, just a faint blip, gone in seconds. That's how it earned its nickname, the Wooden Wonder. It wasn't just fast, it was versatile. It became a bomber, a photo reconnaissance plane, and even a night fighter. It could sneak deep into Germany, take crystal clear photographs of secret facilities, and vanish before interceptors even scrambled. In an era dominated by firepower and armor, the Mosquito proved that speed and intelligence could win battles too. Even Adolf Hitler himself reportedly demanded to know how a wooden plane could humiliate his Luftwaffe so many times. By 1942, the Mosquito had become a legend and a nightmare for the Germans. Its missions were bold, often bordering on insane. One of the most famous was the Oslo raid. British intelligence discovered that Nazi officials were meeting at a broadcasting house in Norway. Two Mosquitoes flew low through fog and snow, dodging mountain ranges and radar alike. They arrived exactly on schedule, dropped their bombs, destroyed the station, and flew home without losing a single plane. Then came the Aarhus and Omjeng raids. Surgical strikes so precise they looked like something out of a movie. The Omjeng raid in 1944, known as Operation Jericho, used Mosquitoes to break the walls of a Gestapo prison, freeing members of the French resistance. Each mission pushed the limits of what aircraft could do, flying low, skimming tree lines, sometimes at less than 100 feet above the ground. Luftwaffe pilots were furious. They called it the Cursed Ghost, because every time they thought they had the Mosquito trapped, it vanished. Even Göring, commander of the German Air Force, famously ranted, "It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy." The British, who can afford aluminium better than we can, knocked together a beautiful wooden aircraft that every piano factory over there is building. So how did a wooden plane survive the brutality of World War II? The secret was in its craftsmanship. De Havilland's engineers didn't just use ordinary wood, they created laminated plywood, thin layers of birch and balsa bonded with powerful adhesives, forming a material that was incredibly strong yet flexible. This sandwich structure made the Mosquito light, aerodynamic, and surprisingly durable. And because it didn't rely on scarce metals, production could happen in furniture factories, piano workshops, and even cabinet-making shops. In total, more than 7,700 Mosquitoes were built during the war, each one a masterpiece of British ingenuity. It wasn't just an engineering win, it was a symbol of defiance. When the odds were against them, the British didn't double down on brute force. They chose creativity, and it worked. The Mosquito's design became the blueprint for future generations of aircraft, showing the world that innovation doesn't always mean adding more armor or firepower. Sometimes, it means rethinking what's possible. Even decades later, pilots who flew the Mosquito would call it the most thrilling aircraft ever built, light, smooth, and impossibly fast. It wasn't made to look intimidating, but it didn't need to. When the war ended, the Mosquito's legacy lived on. It had flown over 28,000 combat missions. It had served in bombing runs, reconnaissance, pathfinding, and even electronic warfare. But more than its victories, it left behind a lesson that brilliance doesn't always come from power. Sometimes, it comes from imagination. While the Spitfire became the symbol of courage, and the Lancaster bomber became the hammer of victory, the Mosquito was the artist's brush. Elegant, clever, and silent. It taught engineers that lightweight materials could revolutionize aviation, a concept that paved the way for modern composite aircraft today. And perhaps the most poetic part, when the world's greatest war ended, one of its greatest machines wasn't made of metal or steel, but of wood, carved and assembled by the hands of craftsmen who once built furniture and violins. The Mosquito proved that sometimes, the most powerful weapon in war isn't destruction, it's innovation.